The rain fell in thin, cold sheets across the busy street. Sundar Pichai sat alone at the corner table of a small roadside cafe, a place where nobody expected to see the CEO of one of the biggest tech companies in the world. His jacket was draped. Across the chair beside him, his phone face down on the table. He wanted silence, a break from the noise of boardrooms and constant calls. He stirred his tea slowly, watching raindrops chase each other down the glass window. Outside, people hurried past, some with umbrellas, others shielding themselves with newspapers. That was when he saw her. A girl, no older than 12, barefoot, her thin dress clinging to her in the rain. She stood by the entrance, hesitant, her eyes scanning the tables. Inside Dot, the waitress, noticed her too, and frowned. "You can't stand there," she called, waving her away. The girl nodded quickly, almost apologetically, and turned to leave. But Sundar felt something stir inside him, an unease, a pull. He stood and called softly, "Wait." The girl froze, her shoulders tense. Slowly she turned back, meeting his eyes with a mixture of hope and fear. "Come in," he said, moving his chair so she could step inside. She hesitated, her fingers twisting around the edge of her dress. When she finally walked in, she didn't sit. Instead, she looked at him with those wide, searching eyes and asked in a voice so soft he almost missed it, "Can I eat with you?" The question hit him harder than he expected. It wasn't just hunger in her tone, it was loneliness. Kind of had nothing to do with food. He nodded without a word, motioning for her to sit. The waitress looked uneasy, but brought an extra plate when Sundar ordered 2 full meals. The girl sat across from him, her posture stiff, as though she wasn't sure she was allowed to be there. They ate in silence at first. She took small bites, glancing at the door every so often, like she feared someone might burst in and take her away. Sundar watched her carefully. She was too thin, her hair tangled, her hands trembling slightly as she held the fork. "What's your name?" He asked finally. Dashi hesitated, then said, "Asha." "Asha," he repeated, smiling faintly. "That's a beautiful name." Her lips twitched, almost forming a smile, but it faded quickly. "Thank you," she murmured, eyes fixed on her plate. "Where are your parents?" Asha's fork stopped midair. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she set it down, clasping her hands in her lap. "Gone," she whispered. "Both." The words were heavy, final. Sundar felt something twist inside him. He wanted to ask more, but there was something in her face, a quiet warning that the story behind that word was too raw to touch yet. They ate the rest of the meal slowly. Every now and then, Asha's eyes flickered toward the window, following the shapes of passing cars. Sundar noticed her gaze lingered on a police van parked across the street. Her body TNSED dot when the plates were cleared. He asked if she wanted dessert. She shook her head, glancing toward the door again. "I should go," she said quickly, standing up. "It's still raining," he pointed out. "Wait a little." But she was already stepping away. Then she turned back, her eyes locking with his in a way that sent a shiver down his spine. "Thank you," she said, "for letting me sit here. No one else lets me." And before he could respond, she slipped out into the rain. Sundar watched her disappear into the blur of water and headlights. Something told him this wasn't the last time he would see Asha. But what he didn't know was that following her would pull him into a world he had never imagined, and uncover a truth that would change both their lives forever. The rain had eased into a soft drizzle by the time Sundar stepped out of the cafe. The street smelled of wet earth and gasoline, and puddles mirrored the faint glow of street lamps. He scanned the footpath, trying to spot Asha, but the crowds had already swallowed her small figure. A strange restlessness settled in his chest. It wasn't just concern, it was something heavier, like an unanswered question that refused to let go. He stood under the cafe's awning for a moment, debating with himself. Most people in his position would have gone back inside, paid the bill, and returned to their warm homes. But Sundar couldn't. Something about Asha's eyes, that flicker of fear when she glanced at the police van, stayed with him. So, He pulled his jacket tighter and started walking in the direction she had gone. The night was alive, with the sound of dripping water from rooftops, tires hissing over wet roads, and the occasional honk of a distant car. He passed a row of shuttered shops, their corrugated doors slick with rain, then turned down a narrower lane. His shoes splashed in shallow puddles, soaking the hem of his pants. He kept scanning ahead, looking for any sign of her dot halfway down. The lane, he spotted movement, a small figure darting quickly between shadows, hugging the wall. Even from a distance, he recognized the slight hunched frame, Asha. She moved fast, glancing over her shoulder once and then slipped through. A gap between two buildings. Sundar quickened his pace, his heartbeat matching the rhythm of his steps. He reached the gap and peered in. It was an alley, barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side. Broken glass crunched under his shoes as he entered. The walls were lined with graffiti, some bright and defiant, others faded into ghostly shapes by time and rain. Asha was a few steps ahead, crouching beside a stack of cardboard boxes. When she turned and saw him, her eyes widened in shock. "Why are you following me?" She asked sharply, her voice suddenly louder than it had been at the cafe. "I just wanted to make sure you're safe," Sundar said calmly, though inside he wondered if he had already crossed a line. "Safe?" She let out a small, humorless laugh. "No one is safe here." Before he could reply, a sound came from deeper in the alley. A low cough, followed by a weak groan. Asha's body stiffened. She glanced toward the sound, then back at him, as if weighing whether to trust him. Finally, she said, "You shouldn't be here. But since you are, you might as well know." She turned and walked further into the alley, and Sundar followed, his shoes slipping slightly on the damp concrete. The smell of mildew grew stronger. At the very end of the alley, behind a stack of old crates and metal scraps, was a makeshift shelter, tarps tied to walls with frayed rope, their edges fluttering in the breeze. Asha knelt beside the shelter and lifted one of the tarps. Inside, a woman lay on a thin mat, her face pale, her breathing shallow. Strands of wet hair clung to her cheeks. Sundar's first thought was that this was Asha's mother, but the age was wrong. This woman looked barely 20. "This is Meera," Asha said quietly. "She's all I have." Sundar crouched beside her. "What happened to her?" "She's sick," Asha replied, her voice trembling. "Fever. Bad fever. She can't walk much now. We've been here for weeks." He felt a heavy knot form in his stomach. "Haven't you taken her to a clinic?" Asha's gaze hardened. "Do you think they treat people like us for free? And if the police find us?" She trailed off, biting her lip. He didn't press further, but the unspoken truth hung in the air. There was a reason she feared being noticed. A reason she avoided places with authority figures. He reached into his pocket and took out his wallet. "Asha, I can help. We can take Meera to a doctor tonight." But she shook her head violently, her hair whipping across her face. No hospitals. You don't understand." The way she said it, sharp, desperate, made him pause. This wasn't just about money or pride. Something deeper was at play. Something that made hospitals dangerous for them, before he could ask. Meera stirred weakly, her eyes opening just a fraction. She looked at Sundar with a flicker of recognition, and then, to his surprise, she whispered his name. He froze. "You know me?" Meera's lips moved again, but the words were too soft to catch. Sundar leaned closer, the rain dripping from his hair onto the tarp. She whispered once more, barely audible. "They'll find you too." And then her eyes fluttered. Shut. Asha quickly pulled the tarp down, sealing her away from the damp air. She looked up at him, her voice trembling but firm. "You need to leave now, before it's too late." But Sundar didn't move. Because in that moment, he realized he had just stepped into something far bigger and far more dangerous than helping a hungry child. Asterisk, the rain had picked up again, though softer now, more of a steady whisper than the wild sheets from earlier. Sundar stood there in the narrow alley, his shoes sinking slightly into the damp grime beneath him. His mind was racing. He could feel the cold seeping through his jacket, but what unsettled him more was Meera's voice, that faint whisper, The way she'd said his name as if it carried the weight of something dangerous. And that final warning? "They'll find you too." Asha stood between him and the shelter, her small body rigid, like a guard who refused to let him take another step. Her eyes didn't have the innocence of a child anymore. They were hard, protective, like she had been forced to grow older too soon. "Asha," he said slowly, keeping his voice soft. "How does Meera know my name?" Her gaze flickered, but she didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked past him toward the entrance of the alley, as though expecting someone or something to appear. "We don't have time for this," she muttered. "You need to leave before they see you here." Asterisk. Before who sees? Me? Sundar pressed. She hesitated again, her lips parting slightly, but then she shook her head. "If you stay, you'll be in danger too." Her tone wasn't dramatic. It was matter of fact, like she was stating a truth she had learned. The hard way. And that only made Sundar more determined to understand. Asterisk. He crouched slightly, so his eyes met hers. "Asha, I'm not leaving until you tell me what's going on. If you're in trouble, I can help, but I need to know the truth." For a moment, her tough exterior cracked. Her lower lip trembled, and she looked away. "People are watching us," she said finally. "They always are. If they find Meera, they'll take her away again. And if they see you with us..." She stopped herself, shaking her head as if trying to push away the thought. Before he could press further, there was a sound, faint footsteps at the far end of the alley. Sundar turned his head sharply. Two men appeared, their shapes barely visible in the dim light. They weren't in uniforms, but something about their movements, slow, deliberate, watchful, made him instantly alert. Asha's eyes widened. "It's them," she whispered. "Who?" "Just don't talk. Follow." She grabbed his sleeve, her fingers surprisingly strong for someone so small, and pulled him toward the crates stacked behind the shelter. Meera stirred again inside. But Asha quickly placed a hand on the tarp, a silent signal for her to stay. "Quiet." The footsteps grew closer, echoing against the narrow walls. "We know you're here," one of the men called out. His voice was calm but carried a sharp edge. "No point hiding." Sundar's instinct told him to step out, to confront them, to demand answers, but Asha's grip tightened, and something in her expression stopped him. This wasn't a situation where speaking would fix anything. The men stopped just a few meters away. One of them kicked a loose can, sending it skittering loudly across the ground. The other scanned the shadows, his eyes narrowing. Sundar felt his pulse quicken. "She's not here," the first man muttered. "Maybe she moved." "Nah?" The second replied. "She's too sick to go far. She's close. We just have to wait her out." They lingered a moment longer, then turned and walked back toward the street. Their footsteps faded, but Sundar stayed still, waiting until even the faintest sound was gone. When it was safe, Asha exhaled shakily. "They've been looking for us for days," she said. "They know Meera's weak. They want to take her. Back. Take her back where?" Sundar asked. Asha didn't answer right away. She glanced at the tarp, then back at him. "Somewhere worse than here," she said finally. "A place she escaped from." He studied her face, the way she avoided. His eyes, the way her voice carried the weight of something too dark for a child to explain. Every instinct in him told him he couldn't just walk away now. He stood slowly. "Asha, I can't pretend I didn't see this. I'm going to help you, both of you, no matter what it takes." She shook her head quickly, panic flashing. In her eyes, "You don't understand. If you help us, you'll be marked too." "Then so be it," he said quietly, but firmly. Asha stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide if he was foolish or brave. Finally, she stepped aside, letting him closer to the shelter. When he knelt beside Meera again, she opened her eyes weakly. Her gaze was glassy, but there was something in it. Urgency, recognition. "You're in danger now," she murmured. "Because you're already part of this." Her hand trembled as she reached for his. He held it gently, feeling how frail she was. "Meera," he said softly, "tell me who's after you." Her lips moved slowly, each word costing her effort. People you thought were your allies. The rain drummed harder on the tarp, the sound filling the tense silence between them. And then, before he could ask more, she closed her eyes again. Slipping into unconsciousness, Asha looked at him, her face pale. Now do you see why you should have walked away? But Sundar didn't answer. Because deep down he knew this was only the beginning, and walking away was no longer an option. Asterisk, the night had deepened. The drizzle turning into a soft mist that curled like smoke under the dim streetlights. Sundar stayed crouched beside the shelter, listening to the slow, uneven sound of Meera's breathing. The words she had just spoken, people you thought were your allies, replayed in his mind, over and over, each time cutting deeper. He had built his life around trust in a small, carefully chosen circle. If she was right, then that circle had already been breached. Asha was still standing nearby, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She looked smaller than before, almost as if the weight of the conversation had pressed her down. Her eyes darted between Sundar and the narrow entrance of the alley, as though she half expected those two men to return. Asha, Sundar said finally, his voice quiet but steady. I need to know what they want with Meera, not just guesses. The truth. Her gaze hardened again. The truth is dangerous. So is not knowing, he replied. She studied him for a moment, then crouched beside him, lowering her voice to a whisper. Meera used to work for them, the people who are after us now. She did something important, something they didn't want the world to see. And when she tried to tell someone, they locked her away. She escaped, but they've been hunting her since. Sundar frowned, his mind racing through possibilities. What kind of work? Asha's eyes flickered toward him, then away again. I don't know all of it. She never tells me the whole thing. Maybe to protect me, but she said once that if the wrong person heard her story, powerful people could lose everything. Powerful people. The phrase sent a chill down his spine. In his world, those two words often carried more danger than any weapon. He took a slow breath, trying to piece together the threads. When Meera saw me, she knew who I was? Are you saying that the people after her, they're connected to my work? Asha hesitated, then nodded almost imperceptibly. She said your name more than once, even before today. She said, one day we might meet you, and that you'd have to choose. Choose what? Asha's voice dropped even lower. Whether to save yourself, or to save us? The air seemed to grow colder around him. In the distance, a train horn wailed, long and mournful. Sundar didn't respond right away, not because he didn't have an answer, but because he knew that once he spoke, there would be no going back. Instead, he pulled out his phone, but as he unlocked it, Asha's hand shot out, gripping his wrist. Don't call anyone, she said urgently. They'll hear it. They listen to everything. That's how they find us. He looked at her, realizing she wasn't speaking out of paranoia. There was conviction in her tone, a certainty that only came from experience. Slowly, he slipped the phone back into his pocket. Then we'll do this without them, he said. Asha gave a small, almost disbelieving shake of her head. You don't understand how big they are. They have eyes. Everywhere. People you'd never suspect. They'll already know you were here tonight. He was about to respond when Meera stirred again. Her eyes opened, glassy but sharp with urgency. You need to leave now, she said weakly. If they see you here, they'll know you've chosen your side. Sundar leaned closer. Then tell me what I need to do. Her lips trembled. There's a place by the river. An old warehouse. I hid something there before they caught me. It's proof. Enough to bring them down, but I can't get to it. Not like this. What kind of proof? He asked. The kind that will make you a target, she whispered. Asha reached out, touching Meera's hand. You can't send him. There, she said fiercely. He doesn't know what they'll do to him. But Meera's gaze stayed locked on Sundar. You've already been marked. The only way out now is through. Her words settled in his mind like a stone sinking. In deep water. He knew she was right. Whatever this was, it had already drawn him. Turning away now would only leave him blind to the dangers ahead. The sound of a car engine idling reached the alley. Faint but steady. Asha froze. "They're here," she whispered. Sundar turned toward the entrance, catching the shadow of movement. A figure standing just beyond the glow of the streetlight. It wasn't one of the men from earlier. This person was alone, wearing a long coat, their face hidden under a hood. They didn't move closer. They just stood there, watching. Asha grabbed Sundar's arm, her voice urgent but barely audible. "We have to go now." But before they could move, the hooded figure stepped forward into the light. Sundar's breath caught in his throat. It was someone he knew, someone he had trusted for years. And the look in their eyes told him exactly what Meera had meant about allies. Asterisk. The hooded figure stepped closer, each movement deliberate, as if they wanted him to feel every ounce of pressure in the air between them. The dim light from the street lamp carved sharp lines across their face, and when the hood fell back just enough, Sundar felt his stomach twist. It was Arjun, who had been by his side in countless late-night strategy sessions, who had stood next to him in boardrooms, defending their work against critics. Arjun, the man Sundar had once described as a brother, but the expression on Arjun's face now was not that of a friend. It was cold, precise, unreadable. "You shouldn't be here, Sundar," Arjun said quietly, his tone carrying the kind of authority that didn't need to be loud to be dangerous. "Walk away, and we can pretend this never happened." Asha's grip on Sundar's sleeve tightened so much it hurt. Meera, still half-conscious under the tarp, shifted weakly, her lips moving as if she wanted to speak but couldn't find the strength. Asterisk. Pretend what never happened. Sundar asked, his voice steady despite the storm building inside him. "That I found a sick woman hiding in an alley, hunted like an animal? That she knows my name? That she told me people I trust are the ones after her?" Arjun's jaw flexed. "You don't understand the whole picture. Meera, she's not who you think she is." "Then tell me who she is," Sundar shot back. A flicker of something, irritation, maybe regret, passed through Arjun's eyes. "She's a liability. She knows things that were never meant to leave certain rooms. She took something that doesn't belong to her." "Proof," Sundar said, his mind instantly flashing to Meera's words about the warehouse by the river. Arjun didn't confirm or deny it. He simply took a slow step forward. "If you care about your position, your family, you'll walk away. Now, let the professionals handle this." Asha stepped in front of Sundar before he could answer, her small frame trembling but defiant. "You mean that you take her back so you can make sure she never talks again?" She spat. Arjun single quotes as eyes narrowed, but his voice remained infuriatingly calm. "Asha, you don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough," she said, her voice shaking with both fear and rage. "I know she saved me when no one else would. I know you're lying." The air between them was heavy, every second stretching like a taut wire ready to snap. Sundar could feel it, the choice looming before him. If he sided with Arjun now, maybe the danger would pass over him. Maybe his life would go back to the way it was. But that would mean abandoning Meera and Asha to whatever fate awaited them. And deep down, he already knew he couldn't do that. "Arjun," Sundar said, his voice firm, "if you want me to walk away, you'll have to explain why I'm supposed to ignore the fact that 2 men were here tonight hunting a sick woman. Explain why she knew my name before she ever saw me. Explain why she thinks you're dangerous." Arjun's gaze hardened, the mask of calm cracking just enough to reveal the steel beneath. "Because she is dangerous. To you, to everything you've built. She's not a victim in this story, Sundar. She's the reason there's a story at all. And if you get involved, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Asha made a low sound, something between a gasp and a growl. "He's lying?" She whispered fiercely, "Please, don't listen to him." Sundar looked at Arjun for a long moment, searching for any trace of the man he once trusted. But all he saw was someone who had already chosen his side. "I'm not leaving," Sundar said finally. For the first time, Arjun's expression shifted, not to anger, but to something darker, colder. "Then you've just made yourself a target," he said softly. "And when they come for you, don't say I didn't warn you." Without another word, he pulled his hood back over his head and stepped into the mist, his figure melting into the darkness until he was gone. The silence he left behind felt heavier than his presence had. Sundar exhaled slowly, only now realizing how tense his body had been. Asha turned to him, her eyes wide and fearful. You really mean it? You're going to help us? He nodded. Yes, but we have to move fast. Meera said there's something at a warehouse by the river. We need to get it before they do. Asha's mouth opened, but before she could speak, Meera stirred again. Her voice was barely audible, but the urgency in it was unmistakable. They'll be there already, she whispered, and they won't leave without it. The sound of a car door slamming echoed faintly from the street, followed by the low growl of an engine starting. Asha single quotes, his face went pale. Then we have to go, now. And in that moment, Sundar knew there was no turning back. Whatever was in that warehouse was the key to everything. And they had to get there before it disappeared forever. The city felt different that night. Sharper, darker, as though every shadow carried eyes. Sundar kept glancing over his shoulder as he and Asha moved quickly through the side streets, the drizzle clinging to their skin. Meera, too weak to walk, was bundled into a battered old pushcart that Asha insisted they use. She knew the alleys, the shortcuts, the places where prying eyes couldn't follow. Every turn they took seemed to echo with footsteps that weren't their own. Every distant car horn felt like a warning. Sundar's mind was racing, not just from the risk of being followed, but from the knowledge that whatever lay inside that warehouse could destroy people who had power far beyond him. And perhaps destroy him too. Asha didn't speak much. She kept her head down, pushing the cart with surprising strength for her size. Sundar could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw clenched whenever a car passed too slowly. Meera lay still, her breathing shallow but steady, though. Her eyes would flicker open now and then, as if checking to make sure they were still moving, when the streets opened up toward the river. The air changed. It was colder here, carrying the scent of damp iron and oil. The warehouse loomed ahead, a massive, decaying building with rust-eaten doors and broken windows. A single light flickered on the upper floor, casting long, crooked shadows on the ground. Asha slowed, her voice barely a whisper. We can't just walk in if they're already here. She didn't finish the sentence, but Sundar didn't need her to. He looked at the building, scanning for a way inside that wouldn't put them directly in the line of sight. On the side, half hidden behind a pile of wooden pallets, he spotted a small service door. Its lock was old, corroded, and when he tugged on it, the metal gave way with a sharp snap that sounded far too loud in the quiet night. Inside, the air was stale and cold. Their footsteps echoed against the concrete floor. Rows of abandoned machinery stood like silent sentinels, their shapes hulking and still in the dark. Asha stayed close to Meera, whispering something to her that Sundar couldn't hear. He moved ahead, scanning for movement. It didn't take long before he saw it, the glow of a flashlight sweeping across the far wall. Someone was here. He motioned for Asha to stay hidden with Meera, then crept forward, his footsteps muffled against the dust. The beam of light grew sharper, and soon he could hear the low murmur of voices. Two men, speaking in clipped, hurried tones, said it was hidden in one of these crates. Check them all. Sundar's eyes darted to the nearest stack of wooden boxes. If what Meera had said was true, the proof was somewhere in this building, and these men were close to finding it. He waited until they moved deeper into the row, then slipped toward the far corner. There, wedged between two rusted machines, was a small metal locker, its surface scarred and dented. The padlock on it had already been broken, maybe from years of neglect. Maybe from a previous search. He knelt, pulling the door open. Inside was a weathered leather folder, its edges fraying, its contents bound tightly with a strip of cloth. Even before he untied it, he knew this was what Meera had risked everything for. He pulled the cloth loose, and papers spilled into his hands. Contracts, bank statements, photographs, and one document that made his chest tighten. A signed agreement. between high-ranking figures detailing illegal deals that linked corporate leaders, government officials, and his own organization. It wasn't just evidence. It was an entire map of corruption, the kind that could topple empires. A voice rang out behind him. "Put it down, Sundar." He turned slowly. Arjun stood there, his gun leveled, his face unreadable in the dim light. "You don't know what you're doing," Arjun said, stepping closer. "This isn't your fight. Walk away now, and maybe you can still keep your life the way it is." Sundar held the papers tightly, feeling the weight of them in his hands. "If keeping my life the way it is means letting this stay buried, then I don't want it." Arjun's eyes flickered, but his aim didn't waver. "You think exposing this will fix the world? It'll destroy you and everyone you care about." Asha's voice cut through the air. She had stepped out from the shadows, her small frame trembling, but her eyes blazing. "And if he doesn't, it'll destroy everyone else." For a moment, no one moved. Then Meera's voice, weak but steady, came from behind Asha. "He has to choose, Arjun, and we both know what his choice will be." Arjun's jaw tightened, and for a heartbeat, Sundar thought he might pull the trigger, but then, slowly, he lowered the gun. His expression was something between resignation and regret. "You're making a mistake," he said. And with that, he turned and walked into the shadows. Disappearing into the maze of the warehouse, Sundar exhaled, the tension leaving his body in a rush. He looked down at the papers, then at Asha and Meera. "This doesn't end tonight," he said quietly, "but it starts now." Asha gave a small, tired smile. "Then let's make sure they can't hide anymore." They left the warehouse under the fading light of the street lamp, the folder clutched tightly in Sundar's hand. The road ahead would be dangerous, and nothing in his life would be the same, but for the first time in years, he felt the certainty of walking the right path. As they disappeared into the mist toward the river's edge, the faint sound of sirens echoed in the distance. Whether those sirens were coming for them or for the truth they carried, Sundar didn't yet know. But he was ready.